Top 10 Gems that surged 1,000% in the last decade. Welcome to Tops, where data meets discovery and every gemstone has a story worth uncovering. In 2014, a vivid pink sapphire from Madagascar could be purchased for less than $500 per carat. By 2024, the same stone, untreated and certified, is commanding over $7,000. That's not a typo. It's a price surge of more than 1,000% in under a decade. And sapphire is only the beginning. Quietly behind headlines dominated by diamonds and gold, a different set of gemstones has been rewriting the rules of value. These gems aren't the product of fashion trends or viral marketing. Their rise is documented, geological, and measurable. This isn't a list built on hype. It's a countdown rooted in verified data, real market behavior, and a decade of transformation. These are the top 10 gemstones that surged 1,000% in the last decade, and understanding them might offer a glimpse into where the future of the gemstone world is headed. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 10th, Morganite. The stone fashion engineered to rise. For decades, Morganite sat quietly behind its more celebrated cousins. As the pink to peach variety of beryl, the same mineral family as emerald and aquamarine, it was once considered too pale, too abundant, and too emotionally soft to hold any place among investment-grade gemstones. Jewelers rarely promoted it, collectors seldom sought it, and auction houses ignored it. But around the early 2010s, a shift began, not in geology, but in consumer culture. Western bridal markets, led by digital platforms such as Pinterest and Etsy, began promoting the idea that diamonds weren't the only option for engagement rings. Soft pink, romantic stones became desirable, and Morganite, with its affordability and subtle hue, fits that image perfectly. Yet this surge wasn't driven by rarity. Deposits in Brazil, Afghanistan, and Madagascar continued producing stable output. The mineral remained chemically consistent, an aluminum beryllium silicate with trace manganese, which gave it a blush tone. It required no exotic origin story, no unusual formation process. What made the difference was the narrative. Retailers leaned into Morganite's gentle aesthetic. Brands like K and Brilliant Earth repackaged it as a new classic. Instagram feeds turned it into a symbol of modern love. Between 2014 and 2024, average retail prices increased from $30 to $50 per carat to well over $400 per carat for premium, untreated stones, especially those in calibrated oval or cushion cuts. In some cases, stones once sold for $10 were now priced near $500, an increase of over 1,000%. But beneath the surface, industry veterans took notice. Morganite's value rise wasn't backed by decreasing supply, auction scarcity, or geological rarity. It was a shift in aesthetic trends, a marketing cycle rather than a mineral revelation. And unlike natural price increases caused by supply shocks or mine closures, trend-based spikes carry risk. What fashion gives, fashion can just as easily take away. Still, Morganite's story remains a case study, a gemstone with no historical prestige and no structural rarity, able to surge more than 10 times in price purely through cultural momentum. Not every gemstone needs a royal lineage or an ancient mine. Sometimes all it takes is a generation looking for something different, and an industry ready to sell it to them. Ranked 9th, Tanzanite, the one-time opportunity the market almost missed. In 1967, a Maasai tribesman uncovered a deep blue crystal at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. The discovery would lead to the naming of a new gem species, Tanzanite, a variety of zoisite so vividly blue-violet that Tiffany & Co. agreed to promote it globally under a name that would forever tie it to its only known origin, Tanzania. For years, Tanzanite was treated as a curiosity. Beautiful, yes, but unstable in price, too soft for daily wear, and too geologically isolated to build a long-term investment case. But as time passed, a different story unfolded. In a world saturated with treated sapphires and commercial-grade amethysts, Tanzanite began to offer something unique, a natural trichroic stone with pleochroic flashes of blue, violet, and burgundy, all within a single crystal. From 2010 to 2014, the gem remained accessible. Commercial-grade stones sold for under $100 per carat, and even larger specimens rarely broke the $400 mark. Then came the acceleration, increased regulation of mining zones in the Marilani Hills, coupled with the exhaustion of high-quality veins, pushed premium material into rarity. Meanwhile, demand from China, India, and Western collectors quietly increased, not as a speculative rush, but as a gradual recognition of a dwindling supply. By 2024, prices for top-grade Tanzanite, over 5 carats, intense saturation, precision cut, and untreated, reached $1,000 to $2,000 per carat, a tenfold increase from a decade prior. The jump wasn't explosive. It was gradual, steady, and often missed by those watching only auction headlines. Unlike rubies or Paraíba Tourmalines, Tanzanite's growth occurred behind the scenes, in private transactions in wholesale markets, and in the quiet upward revision of price sheets by longtime dealers. Geologically, Tanzanite remains one of the most constrained gemstones on Earth. All commercial production comes from a single mining area of roughly 7 kilometers. No other deposit has ever been found. And while that limitation once made investors cautious, it now underpins its long-term appeal. But this is not a stone of infinite potential. Its position in the top 10 comes not from being the most expensive, nor the rarest, but from the simple arithmetic of what happens when a finite supply collides with a rising global demand. Quietly and without hype. Ranked 8th, color change garnet, the dual identity that collectors now compete for. At first glance, it resembled a simple garnet, brownish red in daylight, slightly purplish under shade. But under incandescent light, it shifted, not subtly, entirely, from deep forest green to glowing raspberry red, or slate blue to violet fire. The transformation wasn't cosmetic, it was elemental. Color change garnet, particularly from the Bekele region of southern Madagascar, is part of a rare subgroup of pyrope-spessartine garnets that contain trace amounts of vanadium and chromium. This unique chemistry allows it to exhibit a dramatic color shift between warm and cool light sources, a phenomenon once associated almost exclusively with Alexandrite. Before 2010, color change garnets were known to the trade, but only in limited circles. Their optical behavior was respected, but their market value lagged. Retail prices hovered between $50 and $100 per carat, even for well-cut stones. Madagascar's deposits, although discovered in the 1990s, were modest in terms of volume and quality control. What changed wasn't the stone, it was the classification. Collectors began comparing the most intense specimens with Alexandrite, which had already surged in price due to its Russian origin and scarcity. At a fraction of the cost, color change garnet suddenly offered similar visual drama, but with higher dispersion and deeper saturation. Dealers took note. So did custom jewelers. Between 2015 and 2024, top-grade Bekele color change garnets, those with clean transitions, untreated clarity, and sizes over 2 carats, experienced a sharp upward trajectory. Prices surged to $1,000 to $2,000 per carat, with rare pieces exceeding even that in private sale channels. The percentage increase exceeded 1,000%, quietly placing the stone in the same league as long-established investment gems. But the supply couldn't keep pace. Most known material came from shallow diggings and small-scale operations. No industrial mine ever secured long-term access to Bekele's most productive zones. As quality production diminished, demand increased, driven by gem shows, social media showcases, and niche collectors who understood rarity, not just in terms of volume, but also in terms of physics. This garnet doesn't rely on branding or historical legacy. Its appeal lies in an immutable property, the way it defies a fixed identity. In a world where most gemstones are static, this one moves, and that motion is now measured in price. Ranked 7th, Spinel, the gem the industry mispriced for 500 years. For centuries, a Spinel was misnamed, misidentified, and misunderstood. In ancient texts, it shared the same name as ruby. In royal crowns, it stood in for corundum. Even as gemological science advanced, The market kept it in the shadow, beautiful but secondary. Then came the reckoning. By the early 2010s, gem dealers in Asia began separating Spinel not just by origin, but by hue. Pure neon reds from Myanmar and cobalt-rich blues from Vietnam. These weren't muddy or off-tone. They were vivid, open, and chemically unenhanced. While rubies and sapphires faced growing scrutiny over heat treatment and diffusion, Spinel offered something increasingly rare: natural brilliance with no human interference. At the time, prices remained surprisingly low. In 2014, fine-quality red Spinels from Mogok sold for $150 to $250 per carat, and cobalt blue Vietnamese stones fetched slightly more in select markets. But international buyers hadn't yet caught on. Auction records showed little movement. Retail catalogs grouped Spinel with semi-precious stones. The gap between quality and value was gaping. That gap didn't last. Between 2016 and 2022, market perception shifted rapidly. Jewelers in Europe began sourcing unheated Spinel as an alternative to sapphire, also known as corundum. Collectors published comparative analyses. Investment firms reclassified GIA-certified cobalt Spinels as emerging tier assets. By 2024, the price ceiling had been shattered. Top Burmese red Spinels, weighing over 3 carats and untreated, were precision, cut and sold for $2,500 to $5,000 per carat. Cobalt Spinels of comparable size surpassed $6,000, with private buyers in Hong Kong, Bangkok, and Geneva driving competition. The surge wasn't driven by branding, but by correction. Spinel had been systematically undervalued for centuries. Once the error was acknowledged, the adjustment was swift and steep. Unlike Morganite or Tanzanite, Spinel didn't need fashion to validate its worth. It only requires being correctly named. Geologically, these gems remain elusive. Mogok's finest reds emerge in narrow veins, often with irregular crystal habit. Vietnam's Luc Yen region yields cobalt blues only sporadically, and most production is in small sizes. No large-scale industrial mine has been able to maintain a consistent output of fine-grade material. As demand outpaced extraction, prices accelerated. Not with hype, but with inevitability. Today, Spinel is no longer the understudy. It stands on its own. Not because the market discovered something new, but because it finally recognized something that was there all along. Ranked 6th, Untreated Emerald. The green standard that refused to be compromised. In a market saturated with enhancement, untreated emeralds became the exception, and the exception became the standard of wealth. For centuries, emeralds have ranked among the most desired gemstones. Their deep green hue, often associated with Colombian mines like Muzo and Chivor, carried prestige unmatched by most colored stones. But beneath that prestige hid a dilemma. Nearly every emerald on the market was treated, oiled to improve clarity, filled to mask fractures, modified to meet expectations. By 2010, over 95% of emeralds sold globally had undergone some form of treatment. Prices reflected that reality. A high-quality 2-carat emerald, oiled and commercially clean, might command $2,000 to $5,000 per carat. But untreated stones, natural in clarity, vivid in color, and documented by laboratories, were still seen as collector's items rather than mainstream investments. That changed over the following decade. As global wealth concentrated in high-net-worth individuals sought rarity over size, untreated emeralds gained new relevance. Major auction houses began separating their catalogs, treating stones by carat and listing untreated rocks by name. The shift was subtle but decisive. Investors started tracking origin reports, clarity gradings, and treatment disclosures with the same intensity once reserved for diamonds. By 2024, the price difference had widened into a chasm. Colombian untreated emeralds over 3 carats with minor or no inclusions sold for $30,000 to $80,000 per carat. Top Zambian stones, especially those from the Kagem mine, have reached $20,000 or more, with their bluish-green tone increasingly favored by modern collectors. In less than 10 years, prices for untreated investment-grade emeralds had surged by well over 1,000%. And unlike trend-driven gems, this rise wasn't a spike. It was a structural correction. Part of that correction was geological. Unlike sapphires or spinels, emeralds form under extreme conditions. Low pressure, low temperature, and the presence of rare elements like beryllium and chromium in precisely the proper proportions. Clean crystals are the exception. Untreated clean crystals? Virtually geological miracles. But the real turning point came from transparency. As gemstone laboratories like GIA, SSEF, and Gubelin refined their detection techniques, buyers gained clarity, not just in the stone, but in its story. They no longer had to guess whether an emerald was natural or enhanced. Certificates made it sure, and certainty in a volatile market became priceless. Untreated emeralds didn't gain value because they changed in color. They gained value because the market finally decided what mattered most, what hadn't been altered. Ranked fifth, pink sapphire, the color that escaped heat and captured the market. Not long ago, pink sapphire was treated as a byproduct, a stone that failed to become ruby or that fell short of blue. It existed quietly on the fringes, cut, heated, sold, and often forgotten. But over time, one detail changed everything: the absence of heat. Among collectors and high jewelry designers, untreated stones have always carried weight. But in the early 2010s, that weight began to multiply when it came to sapphires. In particular, unheated pink sapphires from Madagascar, with vivid saturation and clean crystal structure, began appearing in auction previews, not as side stones, but as centerpieces. The market hadn't anticipated this. For decades, nearly all pink sapphires have been heated to improve their color. Prices remained modest. In 2014, even a well-cut 2-carat pink sapphire, treated and certified, could be purchased for $300 to $500 per carat. Unheated stones existed, but few dealers emphasized them. Fewer buyers asked for them. There was no absolute premium until there was. By 2016, supply chains from Ilakaka and Andranondambo in southern Madagascar had begun yielding stones of unexpected quality: vivid pink to hot neon magenta, low inclusions, and natural color. Jewelers in Tokyo, Paris, and Seoul took notice. Demand surged, not for large stones, but for rocks that proved authenticity through restraint. No heat, no diffusion, no compromise. By 2024, prices for top-tier, unheated pink sapphires had exceeded $5,000 to $8,000 per carat, depending on size and lab report. Stones once overlooked in dealer parcels were now being sent to Gubelin and SSEF for prestige certification. In just under a decade, the value of unheated pink sapphires had risen by over 1,000%, and yet the market still considered them underpriced compared to their blue and yellow counterparts. The pink sapphire had no royal narrative, no Mughal legend, and no war-torn provenance. Its power came from something simpler: the shift in perception that natural color mattered. That restraint could be rarer than enhancement. That which wasn't done to a gemstone was now more valuable than what was. As designers began setting pink sapphire in platinum and high jewelry ateliers stopped apologizing for its pastel tone, the market rewrote its rules. This wasn't just a pink stone anymore. It was proof that rarity could evolve, not from geology, but from discipline. Ranked fourth, Kashmir Sapphire, the legend that never came back, but kept rising. No modern mine produces Kashmir Sapphire. There are no new veins, no active sites, and no realistic chance of future supply. The last meaningful extraction ended over a century ago, and yet since 2014, its price has surged more than 1,000%, not because of discovery, but because of disappearance. These sapphires, unearthed from the high-altitude Zanskar range of northern India in the late 19th century, are instantly recognizable to those who know. A velvety royal blue, soft-edged but saturated, with a glow that isn't optical but structural. Microscopic inclusions scatter light inside the crystal, diffusing its fire into a haze that no other origin can replicate. In the 1990s and early 2000s, fine Kashmir sapphires occasionally surfaced in old collections and private auctions. At the time, even elite specimens, 5 to 10 carats with SSEF or Gubelin certification were priced in the range of $40,000 to $70,000 per carat. High, but not unreachable. But scarcity changed everything. Between 2014 and 2024, as Burmese sapphires became increasingly politically fraught and Sri Lankan stones flooded the market, collectors turned to Kashmir as the last guaranteed source of pure origin. Each new appearance at auction felt final, as if another piece of geological history had surfaced for the last time. In 2020, a 10.33-carat Kashmir Sapphire sold at Sotheby's for $1.4 million. In 2022, a 12.16-carat stone with classic velvety texture fetched over $3.5 million, marking a per-carat value exceeding $300,000. These were not anomalies. They were part of a pattern, decade-old price sheets becoming irrelevant in the face of increasingly rare items. Kashmir stones are not judged merely by clarity or cut. Their grading includes presence. A stone may carry fewer inclusions or a sharper polish, but if it lacks that signature softness, the velvety aura created by rutile silk, it will never command the same price. That aesthetic, formed by geological conditions that no longer exist, is what investors are now willing to pay any price to secure. There is no new supply, only old stones re-emerging from estates, vaults, and forgotten safe deposit boxes. Each one sold reduces the global inventory, and as the number of certified Kashmir sapphires with documented provenance continues to decline, their market does not cool. It compounds. This is not a gem on the rise. It is a gem in retreat, and in that retreat lies its power. Ranked third, Paraíba Tourmaline, the neon spark that burned through the market. When it was first discovered in the late 1980s, few could believe it was real. Tourmaline, a mineral group known for its broad range of colors, had never produced anything like it, an electric, glowing blue-green that seemed to radiate from within. What set it apart wasn't just color, it was chemistry. High concentrations of copper and traces of manganese gave Paraíba Tourmaline its unmistakable glow. And from the very beginning, supply was the problem. The original deposit in Paraíba State, Brazil, was tiny. In less than a decade, the mine had been largely depleted. From that moment on, the gem's trajectory was sealed. Its value would rise not with hype, but with attrition. By 2010, prices for fine-quality Brazilian Paraíba tourmalines already exceeded $10,000 per carat. Then Mozambique and Nigeria revealed similar copper-bearing deposits. At first, traditionalists dismissed them. However, as gem labs confirmed a near-identical composition and optical properties, the market initially responded cautiously, then aggressively. Between 2014 and 2024, the top end of the Paraíba tourmaline market underwent an explosive realignment. Brazilian origin stones with vivid neon color and minimal inclusions began selling at $50,000 to over $100,000 per carat. In one 2023 auction, a single ring featuring a 6.5-carat Brazilian Paraíba fetched more than $1 million. Even Mozambique stones, once considered secondary, have climbed to $10,000 to $30,000 per carat, depending on saturation and lab provenance. The growth wasn't purely geological. While Mozambique produced more material than Brazil, high-quality stones remained rare, and the rush to mine deeper led to declining yields. With each year, the supply narrowed. Demand, however, did not. What makes Paraíba unique in the investment world is its convergence of three key factors: a limited origin, a distinctive visual identity, and a measurable chemical signature. Unlike many colored stones, its copper content can be tested. Its color, often described as neon or electric, cannot be confused with sapphire or topaz, and its provenance, usually confirmed by spectroscopy, adds a level of trust the market craves. For dealers and collectors, Paraíba tourmaline became a benchmark not just of rarity, but of modern gemstone investing. A gem with no centuries-old royal history, no ancient mines. Yet within 35 years of discovery, it became one of the most expensive gemstones per carat on Earth. This wasn't a rediscovered treasure, it was a newly born one, and its market rose not because of tradition, but because nature delivered a one-time event and the world noticed. Ranked second, Alexandrite, the gem that changes color and markets. Discovered in the Ural Mountains of Russia in the 1830s, Alexandrite quickly became part of the world of imperial symbolism. It was named after Tsar Alexander II, its red to green shift echoing the national colors of the Russian Empire. But beyond the story and the name, this gem carried a property almost no other could match. Actual color change, not just under magnification, but with the naked eye. In daylight, it appears green to bluish green. Under incandescent light, it turns red, sometimes with a purplish overtone. This is not an optical illusion or surface reflection. It is pleochroism driven by chromium ions embedded in a precise orthorhombic crystal matrix, a chemical and structural coincidence so rare that it has never been found in large quantities. For decades, Russian Alexandrites were considered irreplaceable. The original mines at Tokovaya in Malyshevo produced sporadically through the 19th and early 20th centuries, then fell silent. By the 1980s, the gem was virtually unobtainable. Then Brazil entered the picture. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, deposits in Hematita and Novello began yielding stones of substantial color shift and reasonable clarity. Later, Sri Lanka and India joined the supply chain, though with generally softer hues. But even with these new sources, the quantities remained small. Alexandrite, unlike tourmaline or garnet, has never been commercially abundant. Its chemistry is too rare, its formation window too narrow. In 2014, fine Alexandrite remained the domain of collectors. Stones above 2 carats with substantial color change could be found for $3,000 to $5,000 per carat, depending on origin and lab reports. By 2024, those prices had undergone a transformation. Russian origin stones exceeding 3 carats began trading at $40,000 to $70,000 per carat, with auction sales exceeding $100,000 per carat for top specimens. A 16.2 3-carat Russian Alexandrite sold for nearly $2 million in 2023, not due to hype, but because of its near-impossible rarity. Even Brazilian material saw explosive growth. Certified stones with complete color shift, green in daylight, red and incandescent, now fetch $15,000 to $30,000 per carat, representing a tenfold increase over the previous decade. In some cases, the market has struggled to price them at all. There are simply too few for reliable benchmarks. What makes Alexandrite unique is not just rarity, it's verifiability. Laboratories can measure the percentage of color change. Spectroscopy can trace the origin. And unlike trends driven by aesthetics or design, Alexandrite's value comes from physics, the measurable transition from one visible spectrum to another. It doesn't matter if the stone is from Russia, Brazil, or Sri Lanka. If it shifts cleanly from one pure color to another, it no longer behaves like a gemstone. It behaves like an event, one that only nature under the most specific conditions can produce, and only once in a very long while. In first place, ruby. The rise that redefined the gemstone market. For most of the 20th century, the highest standard in rubies came from one place, Myanmar. The Mogok Valley's pigeon blood stones were legendary, rich in chromium, low in iron, glowing red even under candlelight. Prices reflected that supremacy. For decades, no other origin came close to it. However, in 2009, a significant shift occurred in the remote northern district of Montepuez, Mozambique. A massive deposit was discovered, one of the largest ruby finds in recorded history. Unlike small-scale sources of the past, this was on an industrial scale. But what shocked the trade wasn't just volume, it was quality. The Mozambique rubies, especially those left unheated, rivaled and in some cases exceeded Burmese stones in clarity, size, and color saturation. At first, the market hesitated. New origins often take years to gain recognition. However, by 2014, high jewelry houses in Europe and Asia had begun testing the material. Lab reports from SSCF, GIA, and Gubelin confirmed what dealers had already whispered. Montepuez rubies, especially those without heat treatment, were unlike anything seen in generations. Prices began their ascent. In 2014, an unheated Mozambique ruby over 3 carats might sell for $1,500 to $3,000 per carat. By 2024, that same stone, if clean, vivid, and lab certified, could command $30,000 to $50,000 per carat, sometimes more. In the highest tier, prices reached auction levels once reserved only for Kashmir Sapphires or Russian Alexandrite. The surge surpassed 1,000%, but it didn't end there. In 2023, the Estrela de Fura, a 55.2 2-carat unheated Mozambique ruby, sold at Sotheby's for $34.8 million, setting a new world record for any ruby and any colored gemstone ever sold publicly. Its origin was not Myanmar, it was Mozambique. This was more than a market correction, it was a realignment. Geologically, the Montepuez deposit produces rubies formed in amphibolite host rock, with trace elements and crystal structures now well studied and documented. But what makes it exceptional is its ability to yield stones that meet all modern investor criteria: size, saturation, untreated purity, and certifiable origin. The result is a gemstone that, within a single decade, rose from newcomer to global benchmark, not by imitation, but by standing on its own terms. Today, Mozambique ruby is no longer the alternative. In many markets, it is the standard, and that makes it the single fastest rising gemstone of the last 10 years, not just in price, but in status. Some of these gemstones were overlooked for decades. Others were dismissed as too familiar, too soft, or too far from the auction spotlight. But over the past 10 years, they rose, not by accident, but because the market finally recalibrated. They weren't created in labs. They weren't hyped by advertising. They gained value because of what they were and what they refused to become. In a world of artificial rarity and digital volatility, these 10 gems have withstood the test of time through geological provenance and the passage of history. And if this past decade was any indication, the next one may be even more unpredictable. Thanks for watching Tops, where history, science, and markets meet. Let us know which one resonates with you in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.